So the retreat at Camp Berea, talking about Camp Spofford, this is keeping camping on the forefront of my mind. I don't know if you've ever been a camp counselor, if you've ever taken kids to camp, but it usually involves doing things that normally you might not like to enjoy. Young Life has a camp in southeast New York called Lake Champion, and it features a ropes course. You might know this as a challenge course, okay? Just picture trees, not real hard, just look out the window. But in these trees are a series of platforms with steel cables, one below and one above. And what you do is you've got a harness with like a carabiner on your belt and two ropes that connect up to the steel cable up top. And you walk from station to station, from platform to platform on the steel cable. Then when you get to the end, there's some sort of like dismount thing where you could jump off and there's someone at the bottom belaying you. There could be a zip line, big swing. But here's the deal, okay? This is 50 feet in the air. And when I took kids to camp for the very first time, I was an extremely mature 22-year-old. We had just done an 8-hour bus ride from Cleveland to southeast New York. Get off the bus, and I find out we've got ropes right away. Like, in order to get all the different cabins through this thing, they schedule it at all times, and so we get to do this first. Okay, I've seen this on video, kind of excited about it, can't wait to do it. Here's what I didn't realize though, all right? When they shoot those videos, they shoot them from the ground up, or they shoot laterally. So one person's on one platform and they're shooting someone as they walk across to the other platform. In both cases, you don't get a sense of the 50 feet. And so I get there and I put the harness on and I take my first step and I realize I am absolutely, positively terrified. Not because I'm afraid of heights, so much as I'm afraid of falling from heights. So I get out there, I'm going very slow. You're secure, but one of the points of it all is to not feel terribly secure. Like, that's part of the fun. And so I go from station 1 to station 2 and station 2 to station 3. And it's not enough, because like life doesn't offer enough challenges on its own, where they'll put obstacles in the way. So instead of a cable, it's a rope. Or there's like a zip line thing that you hook into, so you zip from one station to the other with nothing underneath you. And I can see what's waiting for me. This ends with a swing, meaning that there's a platform, you sit down, they unhook you from the tree, and they hook you into the swing. So then you stand up and you drop. So I know that this is in my future. And as time goes on, I'm getting worked up. So I get to station 4. Station 4 is a single cable with a series of logs where they've drilled a hole through the log. So the cable runs through the holes. So the logs spin. So I take a step out. And the logs spun, and I fell. Now, I only fell 4 feet, okay? But that's not what I thought was going to happen. I thought I was going all the way down. I'm not proud of this. I said a word. It was not a good word. Now, there are degrees of bad words. Okay, there's some bad words that maybe we would say are not as bad as others. Then there are those words that are shockingly bad. This was shockingly bad. And I said it loudly, okay? It echoed. They heard it at the beach, which wasn't close, okay? I seriously even think that birds flew out of trees. I frightened them. I couldn't finish the course. I was so just shot from the whole thing that I went back the way I'd come, and I got off, and my boss was right there. And he had seen and heard everything. And when I saw him, instead of just saying, I'm sorry, or that was hard, I made an excuse. Why? Because I didn't have enough humility to admit that I was wrong and that I was not as strong as I wanted him to think that I was. Humility is one of those qualities we absolutely admire in others, but can find it difficult to practice ourselves. You know, it's not that we're like uber arrogant. We just care about our standing in the eyes of others. What does this person think of me? Is their opinion of me a good one? Like if I say I don't know something, or if I should be getting credit for something that I'm not, if I let that pass, I'm going to give up the opportunity to climb a few rungs on the ladder that I imagine exists in the eyes of others. We resist humility out of a need to be valued. And sometimes that need can be strong enough to manifest itself as entitlement. We claim a right. We demand that others recognize it. You better treat me this way because I deserve it. And in the back of our minds, we're scared that might not be true. Like if they don't treat me the way I want, it might confirm that I was wrong. And what would I do then? It's like trying to maintain a house of cards that at any moment could come crashing down all around us. This morning, we are going to take a look at Mary, the mother of Jesus. She gets a lot of product placement this time of year, like with nativity scenes and all, but we usually don't give her a lot of thought because we don't want to go along with the excessiveness that's really been placed on her since like the 500s. That was when her perpetual virginity was decided by the Second Council of Constantinople. Today, the Catholic Church holds as fact that Mary was conceived without sin. You might think that the Immaculate Conception refers to Jesus. It does not. It actually refers to Mary. If you've ever heard of the Assumption of Mary, that's the belief that she didn't see death, but was immediately taken into heaven. She is called the co-mediatrix. She is called the Queen of Heaven. Her most common appellation is the Blessed Mother. The Hail Mary, as a prayer, it is so commonly known, just as a term, that we use it to describe a football play. And so we push back. We don't think about her or talk about her because we don't want to go there. And I think as a result, we end up missing out because hers is a life worth emulating. Just like Moses, just like David, she wasn't perfect, but there is stuff we can learn from her. In particular, I think that's her humility. I believe she was a simple woman who was given a unique mission in human history when she was what we would consider a child. I don't think she always understood everything, Like there's the song, Mary, did you know that your baby boy, okay? I always picture it being sung by Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. Mary, did you know? We hear that. I think she got some stuff and then she didn't get others. And it was a moving target. But her humility is worth a closer look. That's what we're going to do this morning. So we're going to see, what can we learn from Mary's humility? Please open your Bibles to Luke chapter 1. Last week, I mentioned that Luke structures his first two chapters as a comparison of the births of John the Baptist and Jesus. Both events begin with a visit by the archangel Gabriel. First to Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, and then to Mary. It's interesting to me that he visits Zacharias and not Elizabeth, that he visits Mary and not Joseph, like in this first instance. Both are told, both Zacharias and Mary, are told that pregnancies are coming and that these would be significant. Okay? Luke chapter 1, I'm going to look at verse 17. This is Gabriel talking about John the Baptist. It is he who will go as a forerunner before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children and the disobedient to the attitude of the righteous, so as to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. The pertinent part of the address to Mary begins in verse 30. So jump down from 17 to 30. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom will have no end." What I don't want you to miss, okay, is how Zacharias and then Mary both respond to Gabriel. Verse 18, so I'm going back now. It says that Zacharias said to the angel, "How will I know this for certain? For I am an old man, and my wife is advanced in years." Now, I'm reading out of what's called the New American Standard translation of the Bible. One of the reasons I like it is because it is clear about what is in the text and then what's been added by the translators to make it a little bit more understandable. And you know that you've got one of those if the words are italicized. So here, what's italicized is "for certain." So what Zacharias said to Gabriel, literally, "How will I know this?" It just says, "How will I know this?" Mary's words are in verse 34. Mary said to the angel, "How can this be, since I am a virgin?" Both provide rationales for their questions. For Zacharias, it's about age. "I'm an old man, my wife is advanced in years." Not the best recipe for a baby. As far as Mary's concerned, there's no recipe at all. So how could this possibly be? I don't know, all right, if I'm just looking at the words, that there's a whole lot of difference in the response of one versus the other. But look at the difference of what follows, okay? Mary, she asks her question, and then in verse 35, the angel answers. He says, the angel answered and said to her, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. And for that reason, the Holy Child shall be called the Son of God. Wow. She even gets like a little news after that. You know what? Your relative Elizabeth, this is the mother of John the Baptist, she's also pregnant, like super pregnant. 6 months along now. Look at what happens to Zacharias, okay? So verse 19, I know you're kind of going back and forth, but I want you to see this. The angel answered and said to him, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. And behold, you shall be silent and unable to speak until the day when these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their proper time. How can I know this? Versus how can this be? That's the difference in their statements. Mary gets an explanation. Zacharias gets some discipline. He won't be able to speak or hear. Now, unless the angel is just being completely arbitrary and maybe a little mean, there has to be something in the tone. Something in their tone. Like if you emphasize certain words in the question, if you put a shading on it or you dress it up, like sound it out in your mind, how can I know this? As if to say, you're so full of it. I don't believe you. I don't trust you. Prove it. Whereas Mary, it's more, that's amazing. How is this possible? I don't understand. If that's what's happening, okay, I think it makes sense. There's a big difference between I don't understand, help me understand, and I don't trust you, prove it. Mary responds differently than Zacharias. What she's showing is humility. So what can we learn from her? I think it's that humility makes hard news a little easier to hear. Humility makes hard news a little easier to hear. Is this hard news for Mary? Like, you tell me. Not literally, that's rhetorical. Okay. How could it not be hard? Like, she might not be married yet, but she is betrothed. Like we talked about last week, people are going to make assumptions. They're going to draw their own conclusions. Someone's going to tell Joseph. Because the angel told him what was up after he had decided to divorce Mary, after he had decided to send her away quietly, to give her a certificate of divorce secretly. How did he find out? Who told him? Was it Mary? How do you say what happened when you know what his reaction is going to be? Who on earth would hear, no, it was an angel, and think, okay. No one. But she doesn't complain. On the contrary, you can see her statement in verse 38. Mary said, behold, the bondslave of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word. And the angel departed from her. The bondslave of the Lord, which is just another way of saying slave. It's like dressing it up. I am the Lord's slave. Do with me whatever you want. What would the entitled person do? What would the prideful person say? What's in it for me? How can I get something out of this? How do I know, Gabriel, that you're going to protect me from what Joseph thinks, from what everyone in the town thinks? How can I know this? Like, I have a right to know this. In adopting the label of a slave, she has relinquished her rights. May it be done to me according to your word. I'm not suggesting that she never uttered the phrase, this isn't fair. But when you give up your right to your definition of fair, there's less to push back against. This girl is about to go on the ride of her life. And I don't just mean the next 9 months. I'm talking about the next 33 years. How do you do that? By giving up whatever rights to which you feel you are entitled. She exercised humility, and it made the road a little easier. So now we're going to fast forward to the end of her pregnancy, okay? These are the verses we usually read at Christmas. So flip over to chapter 2, verse 3. Should just be turning the page. And everyone was on his way to register for the census, each to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David, in order to register along with Mary, who was engaged to him and was with child. Because of the census, he has to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem, which was a distance of, wait for it, 90 miles. It could have been shorter if they were willing to go through Samaria, but that was not something that Jews were willing to do. Verse 6 says that while they were in Bethlehem, the time for her to give birth had come, which means that she was very near to the end during the trip. She didn't have to come along, but I really don't think that Joseph wanted to leave her by herself. So she made the trip. Now there's I think a good bit of melding here, like blending, between what the text tells us and what we've started to accept as fact because of artistic representations, paintings, nativity scenes, TV shows, movies, that kind of stuff. There's nothing in here or in Matthew that tells us how they traveled. Like I've always seen her on the back of a camel. We don't know that she rode a camel. But I can practically guarantee that she would rather have not made the journey. You know how I know? Because I have kids. When Nathaniel was on his way, we drove in a very comfortable minivan for a half hour. And Bree would rather have not been there. And I wasn't the most supportive. I mean, I'm there for, my heart's in it, all that kind of stuff. What she needed, I froze. Like she said, could you talk to me? Please talk to me. Help talk me through this. That shouldn't be that hard. I talk. Like this is what I do. I'm doing this right now. But in that moment, nothing. So you know what I did? I got a book and I read to her because I couldn't think of anything to say. Another aspect that's a little bit more cultural than biblical is that, they bounce around from, is there lodging here, is there lodging here, is there lodging here, and they end up in this sweet little stable. It just says there was no room for them in the inn, which is not like a Hojo or a Holiday Inn Express. It's either a room in someone's home or it's a public shelter where any number of people would be staying the night, probably in a single room. Think of it like a small bunkhouse. So they get to this place, there isn't any room inside, and so there is the stable next door. And it says the baby is laid in a manger. We, for whatever reason, we equate manger with the stable. The manger is the crib, except it's not a crib. So if you're picturing, bumpers on the sides, a mobile hanging over. It's a feeding trough. That's what the baby gets laid in. They arrive at the shelter. There's no room, so the place where they've parked their animals next door, that's going to have to do. Just for a second, picture heaven, where the Son of God had his home. Think of how pristine it was, and bright, and clean, and majestic. I don't know what heaven smells like, but I think it smells like awesome, okay? Where he ends up could not be any more different. The smells would have been very different, okay? So instead of hearing choirs of angels, like what came and appeared to the shepherds, that's what the shepherds saw and heard. Glory to God in the highest and peace on earth, etc., etc. That's not Mary and Joseph. For them, the sounds are the animals. And what you don't see is a single complaint. Now, just because it doesn't record that she didn't struggle with travel, that she didn't struggle with the birth. I mean, she's a person, okay? She's a human being. So all of the things that are normal would have been normal for her. And at the same time, she's 13 to 14 years old. It's an extremely patriarchal culture. So I'm not sure how much it even registers to her that she's allowed to complain. But what I do think we can learn from her humility is that it makes hard roads a little easier to travel. In Mary's case, it's literally true, as she went 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Just like she didn't push back against the angel Gabriel with the announcement of the role that she would play in God's grand plan of redemption, she doesn't push back on these less than ideal conditions. And I think it's humility that enables her to respond this way. But what does that mean? What does humility look like when you get under the hood, so to speak? I mentioned earlier that she let go of her right. She didn't say to Gabriel, "This isn't fair," because she gave up her right to fair. She would not have articulated it that way. It's a different time and place. But what I believe is that every sense of entitlement that anyone ever possesses come from someone claiming a right. I have a right to this. I have a right to that. I have a right to be treated this way or not be treated the way you're treating me. I have a right to people showing up on time. I have a right to be happy. Every time we claim a right, it's because we feel like a right's being violated. Or we sense there's a high likelihood it will be violated, and then we start to get angry. Or we assert our pride. That's the opposite of humility, which means that hard news will be harder to hear, and our roads will be harder to travel. Folks, I am living this in real time. I thought, because it was reasonable, that when I got up here, I would be able to say, the pipe under our house is fixed. And we can get on with the business of cleaning it up, and fixing, and just getting rid of it. And it's not. And I think, don't I have a right to not have a giant hole in my living room? Come on. I think to myself, why don't I get to have nice things? In other words, why couldn't it have gone smoothly? And I'll admit, I've gotten frustrated. I've even gotten a little angry. Because I think to myself, I have a right to not have something major happen this last minute. But here's the thing, I don't. The I have a right line of thought assumes a karmic view of life. Good people should have good experiences and bad people bad experiences. What goes around comes around. Ask someone if they think they're a good person. Usually what you get is, I'm not perfect. I'm no saint, but the implication being is that there's worse people out there. My wife and I love Glacier National Park. They don't have black bears, they have grizzly bears. And you can buy a t-shirt that says, you don't have to be faster than everyone. You just have to be faster than someone. That's how we view behavior and the rewards that we deserve from God. And if we don't believe there's a God, we'll say the universe, even though we mean the same thing as God. You don't have to be the best, just don't be the worst. But is that what the Bible teaches? And I'll just tell you, okay, spoiler alert, no. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:12, there's none who does good, there's not even one. If Paul's correct, okay, and I believe that he was, if we all got what we deserved, what would we get? What is it that every single person on earth who has ever lived, what do we deserve? The lake of burning sulfur. That's what we deserve. Because there's no one who does good, not even one. So if what we deserve is hell, okay, maybe not getting what we deserve is a privilege in and of itself. Secondly, like I said earlier, saying I have a right, having a sense of entitlement says something about our identity. Okay, that's a word we use a lot, and I'm not really sure that we know what it means, okay? If you were to ask anyone who knows you, what do you think of you? Like if someone asked your mother or your father or your friends or your coworkers or your dentist, what do you think of you? They would have a statement. They would have a story to tell. They would have an opinion. Whichever one we choose to believe, that is our identity. And for the majority of us, it's an amalgam, like it's a little bit from here, a little bit from there. Being entitled, having a lack of humility, is when we can't give up a right because to do so would threaten our identity. It would threaten the story we've chosen to believe. To give that up would be to sacrifice what we think we need in order to be valued. There's another way, okay? But first, I want you to see the good that can happen if we can get there, okay? So this is going to involve you turning over from Luke to John, specifically chapter 2. Okay, we know this story as Jesus turning water into wine. In the Gospel of John, Mary shows up 2 places. She shows up here at the beginning of his ministry, and then she shows up at the end at the cross. Chances are you have a decent idea of this story. Jesus and the disciples and Mary, they are all invited to this wedding. And then they run out of wine. And Mary decides to bring this to Jesus' attention. I'm just going to read verse 3 and 4. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come." To be clear, he's not being rude. He's not just saying to his mom, "Woman," okay? It's kind of a neutral term. He just says, why do I have to deal with this right now? Because my hour, which for John means his crucifixion, it's not time for that yet. So what does this have to do with me? Here's what I love about this, okay? In verse 5, you can tell that what Mary does is completely ignore Jesus. She doesn't care what he said. She turns to the servants to say, whatever he tells you to do, do it. But the question I have is, why is it that Mary is the one who brings this to Jesus' attention? Why does she bring it to him? Now, it said this was a friend of they knew the family. Otherwise, why would they be invited to the wedding? It's a friend. But this is a time when shame is a very, very big deal. These are small towns. It's the groom's responsibility to pay for the wedding. And so he's going to have to carry this on his back, potentially for the rest of his life. Who else at that wedding knows what it feels like to carry shame, to carry opinions that might not be true? Who else knows what it looks like to live with a stigma? Humility makes another person's problem a little easier to bear. Another way to put this is that humility breeds empathy. When we're willing to lay down our right to whatever is causing us to scream inside our heads, I have a right to, we have time to think about others. And so that develops in us compassion, a sensitivity to what others are going through. To be clear, we're not talking about presenting yourself as a doormat. It's not a requirement to remain in an abusive situation or to feel like you aren't allowed to take a minute because life has become too much. I'm talking about resisting pride and needing to have everything our way or taking it out on others when it isn't the way we want. There's a difference between needing to catch your breath because you can't breathe and demanding others define themselves by your expectations. So how do we do this? Okay. Let go of your rights by letting Jesus be enough. Let go of your rights by letting Jesus be enough. Meaning, anytime you start to get frustrated, anytime you start to get angry, ask yourself, what need, what right am I trying to claim? What am I trying to protect because I'm afraid I might lose it? And is Jesus enough? Is Jesus enough? Do I need a floor that doesn't have a gigantic 2-yard hole in it? Or do I need Jesus? Do I need everything to go the way that I want it to go? Or do I need Jesus? Do I need people to respect me? Do I need people to love me? Do I need anything that I can think of? Or is Jesus enough? If Christ is enough, then I don't need, and I have room to give. Because my cup runs over. Let go of your rights by letting Jesus be enough.